Hey Lance, got an easy question for you. Is Margit trash?
No, Margit can Margit it. I broke them already.
Okay. Well, why do you think Margit can Margit it?
So my take on him is it's the Simpsons meme. An old man with a walking stick just yells at tarnished shaped clouds.
Is this a grumpy old man with a stick?
Grumpy man with the stick. I mean, this is your welcome to the lands between, right? Like Vare called you maidenless, what, 5 minutes ago?
Yeah.
You follow the grace lines and you get thrown at this guy who just wants you to get off of his lawn. That's all he really
That's
wants.
all he really wants.
Yep. What about you?
He's like he's
Eh?
he's okay. I have a lot of love for the character of Margit, right? And
Hmm.
I actually think that he is largely a really good teacher of the game, but there is like one piece of his character and of his fight that like feels like it is this artificial difficulty setter that is just completely in contrast with the rest of the game.
Hmm.
And
I wonder what that could be.
I mean, it's the attack delay, right? Like when he holds that, when he holds his staff over his head to do the staff flick attack and smite
Hmm.
you down, he can delay that attack into your next pull.
Yes.
It's atrocious. Nobody else in the entirety of Elden Ring does any like delays that hard. It's that dramatic. But let's save that for the discussion about the game mechanics. I want to start first by talking to you about your experience because you're new to the Souls series, like by and large. Elden Ring was your first Souls game, and since then you have played every Souls game. You played all the DLC. You're like, I mean, to say you have drunk the Kool-Aid would be the understatement of the century, right? Like
I
you
think I
are.
like franchised the Kool-Aid.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would absolutely agree. But I want to know, like, I think a lot of like what makes the boss fights of the Souls games memorable is the environment surrounding them and like the moments leading up to the fog door, right? So like,
Yeah.
I want to know, what was your experience like around Margit leading up to Margit?
Yeah, I mean that's an easy one. It was mostly pain and suffering, some death,
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
lot of just unhappiness and wishing I could go home, but not really knowing where home was.
Right.
Okay, so yeah, to I guess frame it better, I think I've mentioned this before, but I came into this game off the back of The Witcher 3.
Right.
So I was happy with Geralt and Roach.
Right.
That was a duo. That was a team.
Just getting question
Torrent?
marks on a map.
Yeah, exactly. Torrent was like my new Roach. I felt comfortable with my trusty steed. But the key difference was how this game introduced me to the concept of being terrible. Just not being good at something. Like that's not a experience or a feeling I chase or enjoy.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much all that it served me at first. That was the only thing on the menu. Because, I mean, you remember this. My Limgrave experience was probably very archetypical, especially for people that had not played a Souls game already.
Right.
Like, if this was, like, for me, your first dive into Miyazaki land,
Yep.
even if I hadn't played the Souls games, I was genre savvy enough to know that, like, the first boss is someone, or the first fight, if it's not a true boss, big thing, is something you're probably not supposed to beat, like the Asylum Demon type
Right.
fight. I was aware of that, so I didn't feel particularly wronged by how horribly the Scion just kind of threw me in the trash can. I did have this like little thought in the back of my head of like people can seriously beat that guy at the very beginning, because I also, again, the little awareness was like there's supposed to be cool rewards if you can best that thing,
Right.
whatever it might be. Like I knew that much.
You knew it was cooler
So
than whatever you had.
yeah, I knew that that boss was technically beatable, but by somebody who was not me, whose controller was touched by the hand of God. That was kind of where that sat for me. So Crafted Scion was like, okay, that was terrifying, but I'm not supposed to win. It's fine. Then I got dropped into a church. I beat the Soldier of Godric, which I still maintain is best boss fight in the game and should have been the first talk.
Oh, that's a good point. That's a good
Yeah.
point. We should have done that.
Yeah, we need to just cut this one now and shift gears.
Go straight to Godric, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, then I roll up into this breathtaking view, and that was like, I mean, that was a selling moment for sure. The scene that they set when you come out of the church and take in all of Limgrave for the first time, that was perfect. I have nothing to say there. Obviously, I'm going to make a lot of Witcher parallels and comparisons probably, but in the same way that like some of the big views in The Witcher made me curious about that world, like Elden Ring did the same thing.
Right. It was a place
Very
that you
effectively.
could go. Like there were vistas and there were places you could visit, and so like you see a thing, you're like, I wonder if I can go there, right?
I wanted to know what was behind this corner or around that corner. At first, I quickly learned that it's never something good. It probably wants to kill you. So I was taught, I learned the lesson that curiosity will be rewarded and punished in equal measures. I picked that up real fast, courtesy of our good friend, the Tree Sentinel.
Oh god.
Well, okay, so true frame of events. I met Vare, was called Maidenless, thought about my life.
Yeah.
Got scared of one of the little breakable skulls on the ground.
Right.
Because that couldn't be good news.
The ones with the light up eyes?
It wasn't even one of the lit up ones. It was just one of the ones that looks like a cow head.
Oh, Lance.
And I like rolled over it and it broke. And I was like, oh god, what demon from the abyss have I summoned now? I think I literally sat there for a good 30 seconds waiting to see if something was going to like fall out of the sky and kill me. So Tree Sentinel politely showed me the door, and I picked up the lesson of, okay, some things should not be fought yet. But that led to a few sites of grace, some catacomb misadventures, heavy rolling on the Beastman of Farum Azula, then medium rolling. The giant that drops down on you as you approach Stormvale was appropriately terrifying for me. That whole funnel, and I didn't, just run a straight line. I wandered a bit, but it pretty quickly led me toward the welcoming committee for Stormvale Castle with their ballista and soldiers hiding in bushes. It's so rude. I mean, it's not nearly as rude as what's inside the castle, but it's a very good, it's a good sample of what's to come.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I really like asking you about your run-up experience because it's often like just so different from mine. My run-up was completely different. Like it is an open world, and I think that a traditional Souls game, you would have the entire level to reflect on as you walked up to the boss, right? This one, you have the entire world at your beck and call, and the majority of the game is played on Torrent. I mean, like realistically, I think all of Limgrave is best handled on Torrent, with the exception of some of the catacombs, with the exception of like Eastern Limgrave, the Height Manor, like the very few things that I think are best done on foot. But I think Torrent is just this incredibly powerful tool that trivializes a lot of combat. The reason why it could become so trivial is because you could just run past stuff, right? Like the giant that fell off of the top of that cliff as you're running up the hill to Storm Hill. Yeah, I just ran past him. So different from how you handled it, where you're like, oh, I've got to fight that. And then the run up to the ballista guy with all the guys hiding inside of the bushes, I just bought my way around them and just popped right into the tunnel and rested at the site of grace. I didn't have to fight a single one.
How long did you spend trying to convince me that slimes weren't worth killing?
Oh my gosh, that was like, I've never had an experience. Like, you want to talk about like Elden Ring agonies, like yours was just fighting things. Mine was watching you fight them.
Yeah.
it was so painful.
And then for the real setup on Margit, if this was your first Souls experience and you aren't genre savvy, which in this regard I was not. Like, this is not saying that I was. I'm now describing myself. If it's your first Souls game and you aren't genre savvy and you don't have a friend snickering quietly in the background.
Wonder who that could be.
Yeah, at this point, I'm no longer describing myself. The summoning sign for Rogier, right outside after the long hallway. The hallway's ominous. That's its own thing. But the summoning sign isn't really a clear spoiler of what's about to unfold, and I didn't even see it the first time I ran through. So it definitely wasn't a spoiler for me. But if you see it, it probably doesn't mean much yet, because There's, I think, like 1 or 2 locations where you get a gold sign in Limgrave outside of that boss fight. There's Isvan Summon and maybe like 1 more. But like either way, there are very few gold summon signs. I had not seen any of them. I did not know what that meant. I had not learned of Jolly Cooperation. So if you did understand the implications of the summon sign and like you knew how to read boss arena ahead just by how the setup of the room was, you probably had some tension just ratcheting up. For me, it was just an amazing view. And it's one of the first really like true Souls vistas, is how I've come to think about it. Just like Anor Londo in 1. Like the castle just kind of hits different. Like the
Yeah, when
view
you're on the
before the
bridge.
cutscene, yeah, when you're just walking out onto it, like, and you can look up and see the Stormveil just in all of its glory. It's incredible.
Right.
But I arrived at that point battered, bruised, mostly of ego and tenacity and confidence in my skills as a gamer. I showed up at that site of grace realizing that I wasn't shit and I probably wasn't supposed to be here yet. And then a cutscene started. And this is the first cutscene in the game for me. What Margit says is so full of just wonderful foreshadowing. Foul tarnished in search of the Elden Ring, which I won't steal your thunder on. Emboldened by the flame of ambition. And then when he does that gavel drop with his staff and leaps in the air like an anime protagonist,
Yeah.
that was the moment of just, why, God, why? Then someone must extinguish thy flame. Let it be Margit the Fell. I mean, Jesus. We're doing spoilers, so that flame of ambition statement is both from Margit to the character, to the Tarnished, and also kind of from the game to
Right.
you.
Right.
It is, you have been emboldened by the flame of ambition, you with the controller in the chair, wincing nervously at the screen. Someone must extinguish thy flame. And Margit is willing to be that person.
Right.
And even later on, when you meet our boy again, he calls back to the flame of ambition. It is what drove his traitorous kin.
Right.
His peer group, he refers to all of them as traitors because of the same flame of ambition. It is something bad. It is a spark that must be stepped onto him. And none of that landed. Every bit of it went straight over my head the first time. It was just terrifying stuff being said to me.
That a guy with a big stick was saying to you. Yeah. Like,
Yeah.
And he was about to thump you.
Yeah. This was his moment of get off my lawn.
You darn tarnished.
Yeah. And he was also perfectly willing to help. Like,
right.
He was there to play golf. We were looking kind of spherical.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Like, he's just going to give us a little pop and we're going to go right over that fence. Back to wherever we were going to be the tree sentinels problem again.
That's right. I mean, that's totally true. And I think I really like that you bring up the flame of ambition and talking about his kin. Because like one of my favorite things about him and like that whole lead up is that like he's almost exasperated to see you, right? Like he's just annoyed that you're there. And
yes.
And it's because like he has so many other bigger issues and bigger worries in his life than dealing with some uppity tarnished who ain't got no maidens, is maidenless.
Some provincial, as Celovus would say it.
Yes, provincial. That's right. And because like he is so loyal and dedicated to the Erd Tree and the Golden Order and the current way of things, despite being an omen, which like you had alluded to it.
Yeah,
we didn't understand that at the time, but like the omens are not loved by the world by any right. And all of his kin are guided by grace, right? Are in favor with the Erd Tree, but they all spurn it and try to get away from their own destiny. And he just sees them as ungrateful because it's something he could never have, despite being 10 times more loyal, right? Like his whole essence is sorrowful, right? Like and I know like the omens aren't supposed to look jolly happy people, but like he's frowning a lot of the time, right? Like he's a tragic character,
a compelling one.
Yeah, I mean he really is a compelling character entirely.
Yes.
And he's sitting there like a gatekeeper for all of the meager flames that couldn't pass, right? He stands foreboding. His words are foreboding. And so his stature, the difficulty of his boss fight, like, he's the first real challenge for the player to overcome, and he gatekeeps the rest of the game in a way that is like it's all very much in harmony with itself. Like his appearance as a character, his story as somebody who is trying to guard the Erd Tree, who's trying to guard the current way of things. Like
the motives that unfold.
Yeah, it lines up. Like his being there it makes a lot of sense. And I think, one of the things that, just speaking about character, that I really love about Margit when we find out he's Morgott, right? And he's the king. He's the grace-given king of Leyndell, right? But he has no grace. That's all like a facade. But he's the king. He's effectively the ruler of Leyndell. Yet he has the humility to like come down to the position of the bridge guard, the gatekeeper of a castle, despite being a king. He has this like dutiful obedience to the cause and to the Erd Tree, despite being shown no love.
Yes.
And I think it's like one of those moments where it's like the actions itself speak louder than words to take him from just being this stat stick, this health bar with damage abilities, to being more of this character, right? And like in a lot of ways, despite being one of the most unhuman looking things in the entire game, he has these really relatable human-like problems. Yeah, I have nothing but like just positive notes on that. So with that, maybe we can dive into the actual mechanics of the fight itself.
Yep.
I'm just going to go ahead and put my gripe out there. Like the one thing that like what brings it from being like a good boss to just like, it's okay. The intro boss, the first big real boss, is supposed to teach you stuff, right? It's going to it sets the tone for the rest of the game, right?
Mm-hmm.
What I gathered off of Margit is that the bosses are going to delay their attack animations for 3 to 5 seconds before they go off, and that every boss is going to be like that, and that wait time is so long that it feels like this artificial difficulty spike, that it's this artificial difficulty. They're like, oh, you gotta wait forever. And for the Souls players, it messes with their muscle memory, right? But for new players, like, they don't know any better. They're like, oh, well, anything's hard. And I feel like they put that there to basically say, oh, look how hard the first boss is, right? Instead of like having some other mechanic or some other, maybe an even larger move pool or something. They just like had this incredibly long, really like intrusive hang time on his attacks that it didn't feel like honest. It didn't feel like I was making mistakes. It just was like, oh, this feels like this was a mistake in the game. Like, this feels weird.
Mm-hmm. Like there was friction to it.
Yeah, it didn't feel like, and now that I've played through the game, like it doesn't align with how the rest of the game actually plays. So like it sends the player an incorrect message. Like it messages poorly.
Yes.
But with that being said, there is something that I really like about Margit, and that's that he has a move pool that represents every single weapon class that can exist inside the game. He's got a dagger for fast attacks. He's got a sword for that like slightly fast, the mid-range. He's got the staff for like a heavy, and then he's got a colossal hammer. And he's got a ranged attack. So like he's teaching them how to interact with all the different dimensions of combat.
Mm-hmm.
The one exception would be like the new one in jumping as a defensive maneuver. He doesn't teach that. But you know,
you can jump, I think, a couple of his attacks, but there's no tutorialization.
It's not like an earthquake or like a exactly. So I think that is something to be like, as I think that's a W, right? I think a boss that has access to all those different attacks, I think is a huge win. Like that part on its own is really great. It's just the delay that feels like it is at odds with the rest of the game.
I mean, that makes sense. This kind of ties into my mechanics take, but the delay did not stand out as much to me. This is kind of framed, again, from my experiences the first time through, and then once I had kind of the breadth of experience from playing this game and then going back to the other Souls games and thinking about like the lessons and the approaches to of each of the big cornerstone bosses from all of the different games in the series, Margit kind of screams to me like, you can beat me with skill or with power. And that's not a unique, I mean, that's pretty much every boss in the game. But in terms of the early, like kind of first wall tutorializing, like that category of boss, he serves both purposes. And that's a little bit different, I feel like. Because if you can't beat him early on, he acts like the asylum demon, where he is teaching you to run and return later with more power. With the asylum demon, if you don't pick the fire bombs, I mean, I guess you could stand there with your broken sword and swing, but you're supposed to run away, go get your
Right.
gear, and then come back to him. And the tree sentinel teaches you the same thing, but you can kind of bounce off of him more easily. This is one of those, here is a boss in a castle that you want to get through and you cannot. Choose a different door. In this case, go explore, grow stronger, come back with power, you will beat him then. But if you can beat him early on, the like with skill path in my mind, if you have learned enough from the game already, if you have enough previous experience in Souls games, like if you can speak the dialogue of combat well enough, if you are fluent, then he acts much more like Gundyr, where he says, congratulations, the rest of the game is now open to you.
Right.
And you can bounce off of him in many different ways, and you can just grind him until you've gained the skill as well, like if you just learn his abilities as a core. But for me, it was very useful to think about it as like, okay, I'm going to go do some other stuff for a little bit, get a little bit of health, get a little bit of strength, maybe get a weapon upgrade, and that will be my blanket of safety to flail against him with next time.
And I think putting it that way too is like, it's actually really intelligent that they do it that way, because there's another dimension to Elden Ring that the Souls games don't have, in it being an open world, right? So like the fact that this boss can be both of those things, again, it's another W in the column, right? Like,
absolutely. Yeah.
It's hard enough to design a boss that is good in the first place, right?
Yes.
But to have one that is good and also can support the differences in this game from its predecessors to make it not just an exact replica of the other games that are also good, right? That's hard. And that's not just the boss design, that's all the zone leading up to the boss. It's the entire experience all the way up to the fog door.
Agreed. Again, this game has that ability to be buoyant.
Right.
Where if you get, if you are underwater, you pop back to the surface, you can go in a different direction with much more option available. I mean, yeah, you could go after you get to Firelink Shrine. You don't have to go to the Undead Settlement.
Right.
That's what it's called in 1, right? That's not the 3.
Undead Burg.
Undead Burg. Thank you.
No problem.
I binged them all back to back, maybe a little too quickly. The zone names have run together.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember them very vividly, but the names not as much. But like, you don't have to go there first. You can go other ways, but like there is a more linear funnel.
Right.
There's still a ton of flexibility in like how you navigate the world, but not to the same extent.
Yeah, I mean, I like to think of it. One is a bike. Like you can think of it as like spokes on a bike, right? Like there's the central hub, and you can go on a bunch of linear paths that go to places with ends.
Yep.
Elden Ring it's not a spoke with linear paths. It's just a circle, right? Like you can go any infinite number of ways.
It's like a filled-in circle. Exactly. There are no lines you must follow to reach point A.
There are no rails. Exactly.
Just good luck.
The void.
Yeah, no, unless you legacy dungeon, you are kind of the world is your oyster, but the oyster has teeth and a hammer.
So I think mechanically, aside from the delay on attacks, they're really good. Like that phase 2.
Ooh, yeah. That's like, beautiful.
I mean, tell me about like that was your first boss with a phase 2. That obviously like the Souls phases aren't explicit, but like what did that mean to you?
Fear. No, but like for real, like underneath the hood of his mechanics, I love what he shows you. He's a very good first zone, first flagship kind of boss.
Yeah.
He makes a statement. Like, all of status effects work on him equally. He doesn't resist much of anything. I think he resists a little bit of holy damage compared to the rest. He's very flexible. He does say, like, you can come to me on your terms, but you have to beat me in my language.
Right.
Like, I'm going to do all of these things. I'm going to test you. I'm going to quiz you on a lot. Your answers are your choice.
Right.
He does a great job of showing you melee attacks, change-ups, slow, quick, ranged pokes. He'll charge you. He'll do aerial attacks. He will delay. He even brings a tail attack to the table. Like, he covers so many of the Soul's fundamentals to see if you can understand them. He even has, like, the combo extenders, like the Crucible Knights, which are much worse about it, in my opinion, where there is a correct direction to dodge. You can evade these attacks, but there's a right answer for how you dodge it for several of his attacks, not just to not, like, get hit by the follow through, but he will dagger you if you go the wrong way here, that sort of thing. Like, he has options to pull forward with. Like, he teaches a lot of that really well. And for the aerial attack part, yes, it is overly generous. And in retrospect now, it feels like equal parts kind of cruel joke to the veterans to just mess with their muscle memory, and a very generous window for new players, because when you don't have the dialogue of combat, like, memorized, that delay is, the whole process can happen of, oh god, what's he doing? The thought finishes. The new thought, like, starts up of, he's delaying an attack. I should be moving, I think. And then that can finish, and then it's, okay, get ready, and we dodge now? ? And then you hit the dodge button, and then he can hit you with it and kill you. So it's like the perfect synchronization of letting you think everything through, make the decision, and then still get killed by it. And that's just artistically beautiful to me. But all jokes aside, like, it is a little bit long. I mean, I have more trouble with that attack on subsequent playthroughs than I did the first time, because the first time it felt like just a delayed attack, and now it feels like, I mean, it's like what we say, he delays that until the next pull. It's too much. But all of that leads into, like, when you get to phase 2, that is like saying that you've passed the first part of the exam, Gundyr style. Okay, you have passed the swordsmanship part of the test. Here's the snake part, when he sprouts the corruption. That's this moment in Margit's fight of, thou art of passing skill. It's the anime trope, and I love it. This wasn't even a fraction of my power. You are worthy of a bit more. Like, that feeling where he pulls the hammer out is like, oh, okay, so I'm really fucked. Cool, cool. And then he just floats in the air.
Yeah.
Gravity be damned with that hammer. And then the hammer drops. It's
awesome.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And terrifying and infuriating. Like, it is a marvelous, like, phase 2 example, because it's thematic, it's cinematic, it's mechanically tougher, but, like, in a vacuum compared to every other boss now, he's not that challenging of a boss. I mean, he's tough, but he's not some of the other bosses.
Well, yeah, I mean, it'll never be your first experience fighting him ever again.
Yeah, I can never fight him for the first time again, ever. It was so perfect for who I was as a player at the time.
Right. So you want to know what's funny? There's actually a really cool musical transition that happens, which means I'm gonna unpack, like, Margit's theme, because I think
we can unpack music now.
I think that Margit's musical theme actually expresses his story really well, and I think, the idea that in phase 2 he's like, oh, well, I'll give you a little more power then. Like, I'll power up just a little bit. I actually think that's great, because the very beginning of the fight, you are nothing.
You are just another bug he is sweeping off the front porch.
That's exactly right. And so, like, the way the song opens up is with this crescendo from a string choir. It's like, it is this anxiety-inducing swell, and it makes sense because he is this looming character. Like, most humanoid characters are of a relevant height to the Tarnished. Like, even Melania, Blade of Mikola, she's your height, right?
The same Melania, Blade of Mikola, who has never known defeat?
The same, the one and the same. Never known defeat. She's the same height as the Tarnished. Think of Artorias. Artorias is relatively the same height as your Dark Souls character. So this humanoid character menaces over you. And you have this string line behind you that's like, it's just like, you're fucked the entire time. Like, if I was the Tarnished, I would be like looking behind me at the choir of Miyazaki Land. I'd be like, no violins. We don't need all of this right now. Thank you very much. But then what's really weird is that there's like around 30 seconds, like we're not quite at a minute yet. There's this like sorrowful melody that's like intertwined with the anxiety of the strings, right? And on the second playthrough, I realized that like it's sad, right? Like it's almost like it's an expression of his thoughts as he's fighting you, of the other problems that he's thinking of. Like, you are so insignificant that he's thinking about woe is me, about other stuff. You're not even on his mind. And this kind of goes back to what we're talking about. I mean, he's so devout to the Golden Order, to the Erd Tree. He just wants to be like Grace given. He wants grace because he's so dedicated to the Erd Tree. And honestly, like, I think we've talked about this before. Like, he is probably, if the goal is to like sustain the current way of things, he is the best candidate to be the Elden Lord.
Oh, by a mile.
He's powerful. Yeah. Like, his strength is his own. He cares about the current regime. Like, there's nobody who would be better. The fact that he can think about his other problems and not think about you is like such a fucking power statement. And so they basically insult you and they can make you feel bad for the boss all at the same time, which is like, it's impressive and rude at the same time. It is the entire mission statement of Miyazaki Land, right? It's like, we're here to make you feel bad and to be rude to you.
Yes. You are going to feel so much sympathy for someone, for a set of pixels that you hate with every fiber of
your being. At the at phase 2, in the actual like OST, I think it's somewhere like a minute 40-ish or minute 43, something like that. But in game, it's when you hit that phase transition health bar, he'll actually have dialogue that lowers the volume of the music. And that's where he says, "Thou art a passing skill." He jumps into the air, and you get 2 sets of trombone hits that, like, they are some of the most powerful notes to ever be uttered. And for you to just, like, be coming into the game and have this auditory assault with the hammer about to be thrown down on you, it is so impressive. So, like, the phase 2 starts, and then you just hear bum bum, and I'll try to make sure that we're playing this on the actual video so you can hear it, but like, you hear this bum 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 bum. It's like, oh, the real fight's starting, and he's got a hammer and he's gonna kill me. And it's the whole sorrow thing, all of that whole lament that was playing earlier, erased. You have all of his attention. He is going to kill you. He says, it's like he remembers, I have a job to do, and it's to make sure you don't get any farther. I have to protect the Erd Tree. So the way that song can take you on this, like, I mean, it's really a narrative, right? They make the breadcrumbs for a story through sound, through instrumentation.
Agreed. That
makes me again feel like this character, this is a character. This is a boss. It's not just a stat stick with a health bar. Like, he means something more to the world, and that establishes an atmosphere that is like one of the telltale signs of being a good boss, right? And I actually think that, like, Margit, you know, I said he's eh. He's eh because of one thing that I think is out of line. And it's the actual gameplay piece of it that's, like, kind of, like, out of line with it. But outside of that one thing, he's an awesome introduction to the game.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I go back and forth. To me, if I were to, like, letter grade the boss, I think he's, like, I mean, he's easily a B. Like, B. If someone were to say no, I think like Margit's an A, I'd be like, I can see how you got there.
Yeah, for me, Margit is a easy pick for an A, specifically.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, you never forget your first, right?
That's absolutely true.
Like, my first real wall story Souls boss.
Right. Well, there you have it. Margit's a good boss. But hey, guys, that's what we think. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Let us know down in the comments below. And if you're enjoying this boss series where we talk about whether we think a boss is good or not from Elden Ring, then maybe leave a like and subscribe. Until next time, guys, we'll see you later.
I shall remember thee, tarnished, smoldering with